All right, so you're going to play the fighter, and you're going to play the healer, and you can't play another fighter. No, we've already got one fighter. We need a range attack, or we need some kind of crowd control. So sorry, no. What do you mean you're changing now? You can't change from being a cleric. You said you were going to be a cleric. You can't. Well, I suppose a druid, as long as you're not the shape-shifting kind. You're going to be the healing kind. We need a healer. Oh my goodness, why can't anyone just know how to play this game properly? Hello and welcome to this week's episode of How to Be a Great GM. This is a mini rant-esque kind of episode, so be prepared. Recently on our Discord channel, that's discord.gg/greatgm, and yes, it's Speak Like Kirk week, on Discord a question was asked: how do I handle my players fighting over who gets to play what role in building the perfect party? And I was like, what? Wait, where is this rule that says you have to have a perfect party? Now, I understand the origins of the notion of perfect party. If you go way back to the very beginning of Dungeons & Dragons, there were literally a few very specific ideas on what you should have in your party, because those were the classes that were included in those original books. But today, do we still need to worry about having the perfect party? Now, the perfect party, of course, is a damage dealer, someone who does some kind of damage soak, a tank, often they're called, a healer, and then a ranged targeting sort of thing, and then a rogue for traps and chests and things, and then possibly some kind of crowd control if that's the type of game and the game system allows for that sort of thing. And you go, okay, all right, so there are some benefits to having this perfect party. But as a GM, are there some problems with it as well? And yes, there are quite a lot of things. So in a perfect party, the risks that you have is that there are specialists. If you are the healer, you're going to focus on healing. That's your job. You're not going to focus on perhaps doing other things, other skills, for example, or expanding outwards. You're going to be the best healer you can be, or at least your players are going to try and build the best healer they can because they've watched other YouTube channels on how to do that. So the risk is that you have these specialists. And if you have a split party, suddenly the healer is going, well, I can't do anything. I can't interpret, I can't see, I can't work my way out of a paper bag because I needed the ranged person to do that because that's what ranged people do. So there is a big risk that with the specialists, you can't diversify your story too much. You kind of have to keep them together as a group because that's what they were designed to do, which can be problematic from a narrative perspective. The other risk, of course, is that the party can go for so much longer. They have the prerequisite healer who keeps the fighter in the fight. They have the damage soak who can just take all of the damage and keep everybody aggroed on them and all that kind of stuff. And if it's starting to sound very much like I'm describing a computer game, well, that's because that's where the perfect party kind of notion comes from, is that you have to have X, Y, and Z in order to survive. Now, when it comes to computer games, yes, absolutely. That is how the game was designed to a large degree. And you make the game more difficult or impossible by having not a not perfect party, by having a random party or a mixed party or a specialist party. So computer games are very different, hopefully, from TTRPGs, with the fundamental difference being you as the GM. Let me not go too far on that one. We'll come back to that thought. Just think about that, though. Are we playing a computer game which is pre-programmed, or are we playing in a reactionary space which you as the GM are controlling? Okay, so, right, so the party can go for longer because they have this almost rolling kind of system where the damage is dealt, the damage is absorbed, the damage is mitigated, the enemies are stopped before they can do the damage, and so on and so forth. So the party can go for longer, and what that means is that sometimes you can kind of not run out of things to throw at them because, well, you shouldn't ever run out of anything to throw at them, but they go for longer, and that can have some severe implications in terms of your pacing and the like. And then finally, what starts to happen is that you start to build encounters specifically for this type of party. An encounter where there is someone who takes care of the ranged person, there is someone who deals massive damage to the tank, there is someone who deals some interesting crowd controlling or counterspelling to the crowd controller. And again, what happens is the risk is that if one of the party members has a bad roll or you have a good roll with your monsters, suddenly the character falls over. And then you have a specialist on your side who is going to destroy the rest of the party because that very precious kind of turtle shell effect of the perfect party crumbles, and then it's easy to get in there and destroy it. So there are a lot of risks. Now, obviously, there are also a lot of benefits. There are a wide range of skills. You know that all of the skills will be pretty much covered because each one has specialized in their area. So the wizard should know about arcana and that sort of thing. The ranger should be able to track and do survival stuff. There's a lot of pigeonholing happening here, but that does provide for a pretty comprehensive coverage of the skills. With the ability for the party to last for longer as well, you have to realize that that longer running party does allow you to get through more stuff without having to stop and pause every second. So it's a bit of a benefit, and it's also a bit of a risk as well. We have to bear in mind most of the time there is always a flip side to everything. There's always a good side and there's always a bad side. So there is that. And then the specialists, of course, because they have specialized, they are really good at what they're doing. And so you can count them to be sometimes at the peak of their game. Now, I have, as a player, never subscribed or scribed or chosen to play in a perfect party. I just don't believe that that makes very much sense. That's not why I play role-playing games. If I play combat, if I play something like Dragon Age or I play a computer game, then yes, I will try for diversity in terms of my perfect party. But in role-playing, I go, well, that's just not the character I want to play. This is the character I want to play. And I have had experiences where, as the player, I was the non-perfect individual within a perfect party. And it caused the whole party to collapse simply because I couldn't pull my weight in the area that I was supposed to pull my weight, as opposed to the area that I felt my character was going to work in. Now, that was me completely misreading the table. I was at fault there. I should have adapted and gone, well, the table I'm playing at are all about perfect party. So I need to make the perfect party character as well to fit into that. So that was a very strong learning curve. And this, as a game master, is something that you have to be very aware of, is that the perfect party is really strong until a part of it is no longer strong. And that part will crumble very quickly because you've had to build your encounters based on this notion of the perfect party. So if a player comes to you and says, okay, well, I've built this character, and you go, well, everybody else is being the perfect character, this one doesn't fit in that. This is going to cause more problems than it's actually worth. And your obligation then is to advise that player that their character is going to cause more problems than they could possibly imagine. And you can explain to them the idea of the perfect party. Don't feel bad about going to the rest of the player base and saying, well, guys, you've built a perfect party here except for one character. Is this something that you're prepared to risk or is this something that you're willing to change so that we can adjust and adapt? That is entirely up to you. It's your responsibility as the GM to basically be an arbitrator here where you are negotiating with the players. Are we this type of party? Are we that type of party? And then adjusting to it. So what is then the opposite of a perfect party? An imperfect party? Well, no, there are actually two other types of parties that can exist. One I have in, 20 years of role-playing. I very seldom come across it, but I have always wanted to play in one. It's one of the few times where I'm like, I would love to play in that kind of space. Now, that kind of space is the specialist party. And that's where you've got, oh, you know what, let's just have a whole party of paladins and let's see what that's like. Or let's have a whole party of Klingon warriors or Jedi or starfighter pilots. The GM has to adapt. You have to be aware that there are going to be some very good specialists and that there are going to be some very big gaps that they cannot possibly cover, and you're going to have to compensate for that. Now, I can hear a lot of you already going, but I've already planned out. I have made my plan, and it's not changing. If they want to go in as 6 people who shouldn't be there, they're going to die. Sure, great. Well done for you. You've won the game. Absolutely awesome. Good job. Chalk it up as another successful campaign. The idea of a specialist party, the risks are huge. They are going to be missing a whole bunch of skill sets. So if we look in a fantasy type of context where you have a party of mages, all you need is one invisible stalker to wander through the party doing close combat damage, and that party of wizards is going to crumble and fold. Or one giant trap that the wizards didn't see and that deals horrific amounts of physical damage and they all get mutilated beyond repair. Or they just take damage over time and can't heal themselves. Potentially. I mean, it does depend, but we're talking specialists here. And I'm talking extremes, of course, so that we can see where the extremes are and then we can sort of try and find a middle ground. So there are massive, massive gaps in the space. Encounters, unlike the balanced party or the perfect party, as they say, and I use that word perfect, by the way, in inverted commas. I don't feel there's anything such as a perfect party, but that's just terminology. Nomenclature, be damned. So in the specialist party, encounters become even more difficult for you as the GM. With the perfect party, you kind of know you need a this and a this and a this and a that. And it becomes fairly formulaic, one of its weaknesses, but also one of its strengths in terms of planning your encounter. With specialist parties, you kind of go, well, if I give them this kind of enemy, they will annihilate it without any problems whatsoever. But if I give them this kind of enemy, it will annihilate them without any problems whatsoever. So if you go with a mixed bag, you're trying out different things. Again, one of those things just needs to get through, and that can cause a chain reaction. The specialist party, though, if they are designed to have combat, will be absolutely fine at most encounters. Where they'll fall down is the moment you give them a computer-locked door and expect them to try and hack their way through. They just don't have the skill set, they don't have the build for it, and it's not going to happen. They'll have to figure out another way by punching in through the plate glass window next door to the door. You will have to accommodate for that, and you will have to allow for that as the GM to succeed and to not set off the silent alarms, or to do it, but to have a slow response time from the security force. Do you see what I'm saying in terms of the risks of the specialist party? Now, there are some benefits, of course. It is incredibly focused. The specialist party hones in on a specific mission type. They are very good at doing what they're doing. You have a whole bunch of ace fighter pilots. Does that mean every adventure is going to be a dogfight in space? No, it doesn't. But it does mean that every adventure is going to be solvable by people with their particular tool sets, or you have to introduce NPCs to compensate. That's not a bad thing. Having NPCs around gives you a whole bunch of flexibility in terms of being a GM. You can suddenly have love interests, you can have supporting characters, you can have antagonistic characters, you can have mentors, you can have guides, all those kinds of wonderful things that we use our NPCs for. You can now include that in a specialist party. The risk, however, is that those NPCs cannot become infallible I wanted to say dikes, which I suppose would make a sense. They cannot hold back the ocean of ineptitude of the PC characters. So in other words, if you do have a healer droid wandering around with the party, they cannot journey with the party every single time. They cannot be around all the time, and they should be limited in what they can do, because otherwise you are playing the perfect party just with NPCs. That's, I don't think, the correct way of handling this either. A specialist party needs players who are intelligent enough to be able to play the game and realize their limitations and work with those limitations. That's its last benefit, is that it is a really challenging type of game for both the game master and for the players to keep the specialist unit alive. So I think that's particularly important. Now, the third type of party, and this is the last type I'm going to be talking about, and I know there's probably other combinations out there, so put it down in the link, in the comments down below. If you think of another type of party and how to work with that party, put it down in the links below. So the third type of party is an imbalanced party. It is a party that has absolutely no goal, no design parameters whatsoever. I have played with a lot of these kinds of parties, and occasionally there are some things that start to creep in. So what happens in an imbalanced kind of party is everyone builds their character in isolation or in independence of one another, or the GM has no control over the characters that are being built in their world, which I personally advocate. I don't think the GM should ever have control over the characters in terms of character types or in terms of character backgrounds and stories and that sort of thing. I think the GM should be there in terms of world lore to say, well, actually, you can't have an elf with strawberry blonde hair because all the elves in my world shave their heads bald, or they don't have hair, they have scales, or whatever. You should be there for the world building, not for the character building section. And that's my opinion, and that's a different story. So your imbalanced parties, the risks, of course, is that you're going to have overlapping skill sets. So in the specialist party, obviously everyone's going to have similar skills. They're all going to be fighter pilots, or they're all going to be warriors, or they're all going to be archers, or whatever it might be. They are going to have a virtually identical skill set with a few variations here and there for flavor and character building. In imbalanced parties, however, you might have 2 characters or 3 characters that are all rogues, and they all by chance happen to have all of the same skills. In a specialist party, this isn't too much of a problem because everyone is expecting that to be the case. So it's about how do you make your specialist more special than the other specialists, right? In an imbalanced party, though, it suddenly feels like one character is always stealing the thunder of another character. Oh, look, there's another door to open up. Well, we've got 3 rogues. Which one wants to do it? Oh, well, you've got the highest plus because you built it the best, so you get to go. So there is a major risk of skill or ability overlap and then one character overshadowing the others because they either built the character better, or let me rephrase that, they built the character more mechanically sound than the other player who built a flavorful character, or just wasn't as savvy or bothered to build a mechanically strong character. So there is that overshadowing that's going to happen. You also, of course, run the risk of a lack of party cohesion. In specialists, they're working together as a team. In the perfect party, again, they're working together as a team. In an imbalanced party, there is no sense of necessarily team. They're a ragtag bunch who've been forced together. Now, if we watch almost any Hollywood movie where there is an ensemble cast and people are forced to work together, they're always specialists in their areas. They're always the perfect party. Of specialists, I should say, not to get confused with their specialist party. Sometimes we do see that in films like Top Gun and that sort of thing, where you have people who are all the same. So the imbalanced party, oftentimes we have this non-party cohesion because there isn't a sense of why they would work together in the first place. Why would 2 paladins of opposing faiths sit together at the same table, especially if they're opposing faiths? So it starts to add in some interesting questions that you have to try and answer. Now, of course, that is the big thing to bear in mind, is that you then have this completely imbalanced party, and as a result, you're going to get some crazy ideas coming through from the players. They've got such varied skill sets. Some are overlapping, some are not overlapping. They're going to come up with some pretty crazy ideas. So think about that as well. That's a major benefit, is that you have this unpredictability that is going to creep in every single encounter that you face. I know I jumped a little bit, but I forgot about encounters for imbalanced parties or non-specific parties. Encounters are incredibly difficult because you have this mishmash of, oh, well, actually, that one can soak some damage, but that one just does nothing really, and that one, I don't know what that one does, and together they're pretty tough, but when they're separated, so encounters become very, very difficult to manage. So that is in my opinion, that is the 3 different types of groups that you are likely to have, parties that you're likely to potentially have in your game. Now, I have mentioned this before, that the GM is responsible for trying to align the player characters insofar as creating those groups. There is nothing wrong with an imbalanced group. There's nothing wrong with a specialist group, and there's nothing wrong with a perfect party group. What you as the GM have to be aware of is that you need to be, and I hate using this term because it's such a buzzword, but it's the right term to use. You have to be agile in your creation process. So once you've had your session 0 and gone, oh my goodness, I'm dealing with a bunch of specialists. Okay, you need to shift gears. You're not changing your overall plot. You're not changing your master sentence if you have it. You're not changing your what if statement. You are quite literally going, okay, well, now we have a bunch of specialists. How is that going to affect my plot and my story? And yes, I will have to adjust the encounters. Not that you should have built any encounters at this stage anyway. If you've been watching this channel by now, you should realize that all of that stuff only gets done as and when it's needed before an adventure, not months in advance. Don't burn yourself out before you've even started. So you need to take that into consideration, and you need to be aware of what type of party that you have so that you can be a little bit more sensitive to that sort of thing. If you found this video insightful or useful in any way, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. Let's grow the channel even bigger than it already is. And I thank everybody who has already subscribed. And of course, that little goblin bell will alert you to new videos that come out, but they come out every Monday and every Thursday. There's a live show on Thursday nights, 5:30 p.m. UTC, so it's like 10:30 Pacific time, I think, or 11:30 Pacific time. Live show on GM Training Grounds. If you haven't seen that, go check it out on this channel as well. And now, just to make this entire thing that much easier and all that wonderful stuff, I have a new Kickstarter that you may want to look at, especially if you're a spellcaster. This week's episode sponsor is Critical Cards from critical-cards.com. Now, they have made this stack, and this isn't even all of them, by the way, of critical spell cards. Now, if you head on over to their website, that's www.critical-cards.com, you can actually pick up a print and play PDF of these cards already, or you can order online to get your own deck of really cool cards, and we're going to talk about these cards in a little bit. And they're launching a Kickstarter coming soon for a mobile app version. And the nice thing about the mobile app version is that it's not online, so you can have your critical cards with you wherever you go and whenever you go, regardless of internet connectivity. So what makes critical cards that much more interesting than other cards of the type? Well, firstly, the artwork that they have done. I really, really love the artwork. It's really indicative. It's very obvious as to what it is. But what I also like is it's very inclusive. So we are seeing folks in wheelchairs. We're seeing all different sexualities and genders and sizes. But aside from that as well, it's a really clear indicator of what these cards do. Now, the reverse side, of course, is very, very well laid out. Come on, focus there. It's very well laid out. It's very clear what the cards do. They've got information all over the card. There's not a lot of verbose language and stuff, because if you want to know what Burning Hands does, if you want to see what it looks like, you flip the card over and then you can see Burning Hands. So it's very clear, very well laid out, very simple. Keywords and things are either in bold or in caps. Very, very, very straightforward. And as I said, just absolutely wonderful execution of the artwork. Really, really, really pretty. So that's criticalcards.com. Blindness, I thought this was really well done with the eyes that are wiped out with white, in terms of spells. Blight, another cool card that, again, I could show artwork all day. The criticalcards.com, you can go and pre-order it now or watch for that Kickstarter coming out soon for the mobile app. Go and get in there. And the pricing is very, very affordable. Thank them. I thank them for supporting today's episode, and I thank you for watching all the way through to the end. And of course, my Patreons. I thank my Patreons for their support. Now, something that is changing on our Patreon, just as an aside, from July onwards, the Patreon tiers have been reshuffled. No longer are we giving out adventures and maps to our Patreons. We're now giving out footnotes, worksheets, work notes, educational material on how to be a better GM. Things like how to make your NPCs more engaging, and then NPC sheets and cheat sheets and notes and things. So that's how we've shifted it. We've done a whole rebrand of our Patreon. So go and check that out too if you want to support the channel and if you can support the channel. Anyway, big thank you to my Patrons for making this video and this entire channel possible. And until next time, I wish you random drawer. Oh no! Banishment! Ah!